Welcome to Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host, and my guest today is Ben Bressington, the CEO of Behavior Sales. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Hey, super excited to be here, Paul.
Thanks for being on. So, Ben, you've got a company called Behavior Sales, and in looking at it, you're basically paid to hack humans as a social engineer, if I understand this correctly. And I guess the impetus behind Behavior Sales is to help salespeople communicate with their customers and learn about their customers more and be more efficient in what they do and how they sell and have better outcomes. Is that kind of I'm probably putting a little bit of words in your mouth, but tell me a little bit more about Behavior Sales.
Yeah, so it all started because most people struggle with sales. And to be honest, I struggled with sales. I really sucked with sales and being able to communicate with people and connect with others. And as you know, like anyone in sales, like your ability to connect with people kind of determines your income. And if you're not happy with your income, you kind of got to look at, well, where's the mistake? And through that, we ended up creating a technology set that allowed us to get better, because it allowed me to get better. Because I'm like, well, how do I get the feedback loop that I need in my communication? And I spent years, man, like in hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent and invested on personal training, personal development, sales training, sales education. Man, I've flown all around the world to different conferences and events to learn from this guru, right? To learn a framework or a model, only to end up getting frustrated with, like, how do I implement this? Like, a lot of this stuff is taught in theory, and I'm sure you've been to those sales trainings and stuff like that before, where it's just like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, they put people in like the 4 quadrants, and that they're intellectual, they're a social seller, and how to interact. Yeah, there's a million of those courses out there.
Yeah, and it's just like, but I'm like, okay, so you and I are in a conversation right now. How do I use it in that conversation right now? And like some of them are like, well, you need to send them assessment to get them to complete this assessment. I can barely get this person to respond to an email, let alone you want me to send them 150 questions and ask them to complete that before we talk? Well, yeah, best of luck with that, right? And so it just doesn't really work in the real world. So I'm like, there has to be a better way. So literally, the AI I ended up creating it converts an email address into a personality assessment, because then I can, in 15 seconds or less, I can actually determine what your personality type is to allow me to connect with you better. So knowing that information allows me to then start to have a more effective conversation with you, and then go through a closing process or a sales process that works for your personality type. And I found when I started doing it this way, conversations became easier, because I didn't have to fumble through and try and create rapport and mess around with things. And really, the company's just grown from there, and the service has just grown from there, because there's a whole lot going on in the industry right now that communication is getting tougher for a lot of people, particularly remote workforce. You've got clients and leads you deal with right now that you'll never see in person. So there's a whole segment of the industry that unfortunately are really struggling with this virtual Zoom only type stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of my own personal career, that we've actually closed deals without ever meeting the customer, which I think for what we do in technology sales, that never happened. Not unless you're selling commodity items, but if you're selling consulting services and things that we do, that never, but it's happening now. And so I agree with you that doing what we're doing right now is very important.
100%. There's that whole culture, remember, of like, you had to fly and see the client, you had to have a lunch with the client, you had to do, like, that's kind of what they did several years ago.
Yeah.
But I believe this bigger thing happened, this bigger problem happened that most people aren't aware of. And that's why I called the book I just published People Ignorant, because we kind of became ignorant in how to communicate with others, how to connect with each other. And like, you can't just send emojis or memes to leads and clients. And there's some people that just freeze when it comes to having a conversation. I'm sure you've had guests that you've spoken to, like talking to them was like extracting teeth. Like the art of conversation for many is lost. It's like we become ignorant to that.
Yeah. So Mark, Ben, I've always been interested. I was going to say I had Mark Bowden on my show, who's a body language expert. And I've always been fascinated by body language. nonverbal communication. It's always been an interest of mine. I think I told someone I took a course in high school, and ever since then, I've always been kind of attracted to that field. So there's body language, but you're taking it to a next level, right?
Yeah.
You're using AI to take it to the next level, correct?
100%. So one of the things we do is like, I realize that, hey, my sales team, I can try to teach them the 50 different types or 6 different types of body language for them to look for on a Zoom call like this, right? There's things that you can pay attention to. And that just was time and effort and problematic, right? And I'm like, well, hold on. We have technology out there. There's these machine learning things that we could create. Why can't I create a system that literally will pop up on the video and go, hey, reassurance required. So the salesperson then can see, hey, I have to reassure this lead right now, or possible objection that hasn't been voiced, right? So they get the prompts and now they know what to do in the conversation. But so we've combined what we call behavioral intelligence. So we've combined nonverbal with the linguistics. We also analyze over 100 different voice patterns to determine personality type. Like with 50 characters or less, I can determine personality, your needs. So there's really cool things we can actually do. Like, for example, we can actually determine if the person you're talking to, you have influence over. And you might be like, well, Ben, who gives a crap in the sales? Like, that's just rapport and that creation. I'm like, well, hold on. If you don't have influence over that person, when you get to close them, it just ain't going to happen. And it gets more problematic for when we're in complex sales cycles, like what you and I have dealt with in the past. Is that you might have multiple conversations, or you might have multiple parties at a conversation or around a boardroom table. Who has influence over who, and who do you need to have influence over who? Because I've seen many sales deals die because you've been focused on building rapport and influence with the wrong person.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. We've always talked about that. I'll term it in kind of a sales term. Getting stuck too low in an organization sometimes can really hurt you. And to your point, you're dealing with a person that really doesn't have the influence to help, perpetuate and close a deal. And so, but me being an older salesman, you always had to rely on your sales skills and realize, hey, I've got to get up higher in the organization, and then you see what you can do to do that without insulting the person you're working with, of course.
Mm-hmm. So for some of the companies we're working with right now, we can literally analyze every communication in your email inbox or your Teams channel or your Slack, for example, and actually show you the personality dynamics of everyone you're talking to. But we can also predict churn. We can predict unhappiness. And there's actually 17 different emotions that we can actually predict on a scale to show you, hold on, you've got these leads you're talking to right now that are actually starting to lose interest. So if you don't take some type of action right now, they're literally going to start to ghost you. Yeah. Or you know what? It could actually be a client who's paying you that's like started to get a little bit disappointed, disenchanted, disheartened, whatever you want to call it. And they're starting that abandonment cycle, right? They're going to start looking for a new vendor. They're going to start looking for new things. They're going to start taking action in the opposite direction. So we can actually give clients the metrics they need to actually take action in a positive direction. Instead of, I'm sure you've experienced it before, right? You've had a client, which has been great. And then you get this call out of the blue. It's like, hey, Paul, how do you compare to XYZ solution? And we're thinking about moving. And you're like, what the living, why? Where the hell did that come from?
Now you're backpedaling.
Now you're backpedaling. Now you're collapsing possibly on price, which is the worst thing you want to do in a sales position, right? Because then you start losing influence, you start losing rapport. And when you lose that, it's hard to get that stuff back. And there's a whole lot of these soft metrics that are becoming very, very critical in our communication today, that it's fascinating. And there's a lot of research around, if that makes sense.
No, it does. So what are a few examples? I'm fascinated by being on a call with someone and having cues pop up. I mean, that's invaluable. I mean, I've never
100%.
heard of this before. So what are some examples that you could give me of things that would happen on a sales call, real live examples that you've seen?
Here's a real life one. So we've been doing a lot of research recently around the emotion of disgust. And most people don't realize that disgust is a negative emotion. Right. That causes positive action in the opposite direction. So the thing is if at any point in time the disgust emotion gets triggered, it's like I'm now saying, screw you, I'm going elsewhere, right? So the thing is you need to be aware of that, because then that creates instant churn. So for example, a salesperson could have made a joke, could have made a comment which was interpreted wrong for whatever reason, for whatever reason.
It happens.
And all of a sudden it happens, and literally disgust in that person is triggered, right? That entire deal can go sideways, but literally because disgust has been triggered. That's a very fascinating one right now, and we're actually starting to see that and how it's connected to churn. We're seeing also that the dynamics of your relationship. So one of the big things that we map a lot is personality type. So the personality type of the sales rep and the personality of the lead and the client, and is there a match? And the thing is we're starting to actually able to help salespeople see that you're communicating in a way that's not resonating with the lead you're talking to. And as a result, you're having things take multiple conversations when it doesn't need to, because you're just not telling the right story. You're not actually understanding their personality type. And that's why we teach people the 4 personality types, and we show them how they can use that. So there's 2 basic examples of how this is literally saving companies big bucks.
Yeah, that's always been a big one, Ben, about the 4 personality type. The way I communicate, I may think I'm communicating great, but if someone's not a socializer like I am, they may not get that, it may not resonate with them. So I guess the skill is to be able to communicate in their language.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And a lot of people don't know that. So I think the biggest mistake that's happened a lot in the sales training we've analyzed over the last few years is literally that people focus so much on the product and not the prospect. And they fail to actually connect with the prospect and be able to understand the motivations, the drivers, the reasoning, the logic behind the prospect, because then you can sell a product. But until you actually know that, and we see it all the time, like sales reps will get on a call, they'll go, so why are you here today? And the lead or the client will end up going, oh, I just wanted some information about X, Y, and Z. Great. So the sales rep just goes, boom, straight into the presentation, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, hold on. Why are they here? Why are they looking for information? What are they the decision maker? What's the pain they're trying to solve? Because without that context, you're going to be crap out of luck. Like you're going to get to the close. You think you've got this hot lead. No, we're nowhere near hot. Like they're just trying to gather information. Does that make sense?
No, that all what you're saying resonates with me, because sometimes you'll get a call from someone say, hey, I need a new storage array. Yeah. So, you get on the call, and I don't think you're doing the customer service by just saying, hey, what do you need? How many terabytes you need? So to your point, we try to back up and say, okay, I know we're here to talk about storage, but really let's take kind of an agnostic look at the whole environment, find out really, where you're at today, where your pain points are, and how we can. I think customers appreciate that.
Yeah. And well, you've then got the whole, is this going to be compatible with what you're doing? Oh, we're going to be doing the storage because we've got this cloud stuff that's going on, but we've got a smaller data pipe, which is really not going to work for that. So, but there's a big misconception in the sales world. There's a big difference between a sales conversation and an order taking conversation. Yeah. And so many people are the Starbucks barista of sales. And as a result, they literally don't know how to frame that conversation. So we do a lot of conversational coaching for people. I'll give you a very, very simple example. So we talk to a lot of sales reps, independent, what have you. And they're like, man, I don't even know how to reach out to this person on LinkedIn. I get like that when you connect with that person, the screen that says to pop up a message that says, how do you know this person, or how do you connect to this person? They say, I get stuck with writing that message. I'm like, well, isn't that fascinating? Like you don't even know how to frame what you do in a way to be able to pitch to people. And that's just some of the communication problems that a lot of people experience on a daily basis.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a big one, I think, is to think about. So our customers, a lot of my customers tell me they get hit by 70, 80, 90, 100 cold calls a day.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to separate yourself because, and I've had people say to me, so what makes you so special? It's like, because they're so annoyed by getting contacted by people, and you've got to be quick. You've got to have a story, right?
100%. So let me give the people who are listening the 4 personality types, because we've spoken about that, right? So I'm going to give you something you can literally action today and make possible in your life. And it's going to be the easiest thing you're ever going to be able to remember. And I can promise you in like 2 minutes from now, you're actually going to be able to use this in the conversations for the rest of the day.
Great.
So
let's hear it.
There's 4 birds. It's very simple. So the first one I call Vegas, and that's the peacock. And it's called Vegas because they talk fast. They got a strong voice. They got an expressive face, and they want to talk all about them, right? They're the person who's always got a story to tell you and kind of never lets you hop in, right? So they're the person that you classify them as the talker. So we'll see if Paul's been paying attention. What was the name of the bird, Paul?
Vegas.
What was the bird?
Peacock.
Exactly. Do you know anybody like that?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I could name a million people, right? Especially being in sales. There's a lot of sales guys that like to do this, and they like to talk. That's for sure.
Yeah. So when you can identify that peacock, right? The thing is they hate being not noticed. They hate being criticized. So you have to be really careful with feedback, because they can take that feedback personally. You can upset them very aggressively, things like that. So the peacock is important to know. You can tell them from styling. You can tell them from what they wear or status symbol. So there is a lot of things you can read into that. And then on the other side of that, we've got what we call the dove or the pigeon. And what's interesting about the pigeon is if you think of the pigeons in Central Park or wherever you go to a park and you see these pigeons, they're birds that flock together. The pigeon is the type of person that wants to be your friend. They want to be everybody's friend, but they hate taking risks. And they're very, very flighty, right? Like you drop a stick and those pigeons are up in the air and they're all flustering around, right? The pigeon is the type of person that when you take to lunch, they can't decide what's on a menu, and you can never take them to the Cheesecake Factory, because those 100 items on that menu, just like you'll be there for an hour just letting them decide, because every time a plate walks by, they can't decide, right? They're the type of person that needs to also ask every friend what's going on, because their biggest fear is making a decision where they're wrong, or they've taken a risk and they get ridiculed or embarrassed because of it. So when you're talking to that person, you need to make sure you show them how it's safe. It's a risk-free decision, how other people like them have made this decision, and it's actually improved their relationships and their careers. And that's what a lot of salespeople completely miss. Do you agree?
Agree. So as you're talking, I'm thinking when a peacock is talking to a pigeon, if the sales guy is a peacock and he's talking to the pigeon in his language, and he can't understand why the pigeon isn't understanding him or getting it or understanding it, that because he's not speaking to him in his language.
100%. So I'll give you a basic example. The peacock's talking about achievement recognition, right?
Yep.
But the dove is wanting security. They're wanting a quiet, peaceful life. They're wanting harmony. They're not wanting to stick their head out too much, or like they're not wanting the status symbol. They're not wanting to necessarily rock up in the Mercedes that the peacock wants. Yep. They're just wanting the comfort and the security and to like blend with everyone. They would have the Mercedes if everyone else around them had the Mercedes or the Porsche or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
But the thing is, they want to be everybody's friends and they don't like to ruffle feathers, where the peacock is okay pissing you off a little bit, because you know what? It makes them feel better. Very, very, very interesting.
Okay.
So you're not just a pretty face, man.
Yeah, no, I try not to be. It's hard. You know, this is the moneymaker right here, Ben. It's hard to, you know. So we've got the peacock and the dove, and you said there's 4 of them, right?
Exactly. But they have to listen to the other podcasts to get the other 2, right?
Got it. Okay. But I think I know, I know where you're going with this, though, because we all communicate in different ways.
100%.
Nonverbal communication, verbal communication. And, you know, it's an art and a skill all in one, I think.
100%. You're 100%. And it's not taught in college. It's not taught in school. Most sales trainers ignore it. And like you've got the straight line method. You've got all these methods that kind of force people to be somebody else. And that doesn't resonate with a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are used to high pressure sales tactics, which actually make several personality types step back. So you have to be aware of this. And it doesn't necessarily work well when people can just hang up on you or drop the ghost you, right? Or do a chargeback. There's nothing worse than experiencing that churn. So the other 2 birds, we'll just dive into them real quick. So you got Liberty, the eagle. And when you think of an eagle, they're very task focused, their achievement, their authority, they're looking for the ROI, right? The ego wants to be in control, wants to be the boss, and they hate losing with a passion. So you can already start to see how there's some conflict between the ego personality, who's dominant. So, for example, the dove can think an eagle is too pushy and arrogant just because by their nature. So if an eagle is talking to the pigeon, you've actually got to slow your roll a little bit. You've got to calm down a little bit. You've got to be not so expressive with the hands, right? You've got to do a few things to actually meet the communication at their level. So, you know, a few eagles.
Pardon me?
You know a few eagles?
Oh, yeah. It's funny, as you're saying, I'm thinking of some of my customers right now, and a few come to mind for sure.
Exactly. And so the last one is the owl, and I call this the thinker, because this person like wants security, they want structure, they want to know the blueprint, they want to do the research, and they would rather be right than rich. Right? They also hate change. And it's funny when you're doing some technology-based sales and you're dealing with the owl, right? They would rather stay with the wrong system because it's what they've had for the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And you know what? There's that saying got created, you don't get fired for choosing IBM, right?
Right.
So like there's that thought process, even though it could be completely wrong. But for them, it's got the research, the white paper, and they can kind of put that seal of approval that like it's whatever it is. I'm sure you've been in situations where you've seen people buy solutions that are ridiculously overkill for what they need, but they were considered to be the safe, secure thing. And that type of person hates impulsiveness. They are not going to make a fast decision. Like, they're thinking about next Tuesday's lunch today because they're going to make the decision now so they know what next week is looking like, because that's not how they make the decision. They're not the person you can go, hey, man, you want to come for lunch? They're like, not going to happen.
Yeah, I would say that group right there, there's a tremendous amount of those in the IT industry, I think. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's easy for those people to be in the IT industry because they get to show their knowledge and superiority, right? Even though their knowledge could be outdated. And that's a big problem in IT, right? Because knowledge changes and they don't keep up until the white paper or the research paper, or there's 20,000 people talking about it. Like a simple use case example, the Log4j vulnerability that happened, right? It was out for years. Some of the states and the big issues of the ransomware attacks, right? And what's going on there. Huge problems with that, because it's also connected to human behavior. But that's where a lot of them struggle. They fail to see the behavioral element, and it's not just a technology solution.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So let's pivot a little bit to body language. So we're talking a lot about like expressions and things. How important is the body language piece of this? Like on a Zoom call, like how does that work if you're on a Zoom call? Can it be effective?
So 100%. So I tell people really to focus on 3 types of body language cues really in any conversation, because like I can give you a list of 110 of them, but you only need to really master 3 of them to be a more effective communication. And most people don't realize that. I know Mark's got like 7 or 10 different books he talks about body language, and he gives you this long list, but even he'll admit that there's only 3 to 6 core ones that if you pay attention to, you'll be a more effective communicator. I'm sharing them with people right now. So there's the first thing, which is the lip compression. So it's biting the lip, rolling the lips back. It's that like you're holding the lips back, and it comes from that innate emotion of how a baby says no, right? No to the breast milk, no to being fed, right? They're closing their mouth, and what that is doing is that's actually showing withheld objection. You're trying to say something and you're not communicating it at this point in time, right? So good one. That's what that emotion is. That's what that body language is. So if you look for that, particularly in a sales conversation, what you want to realize is like who was talking at that point in time, because it could be somebody else is talking and they're like withholding an objection or an opinion based on what somebody else is saying. So you have to understand the context. This is the biggest mistake you can make with body language or even linguistic analysis, is failing to understand the context, and it's dynamically changing. So does that one make sense?
Yeah, no, perfect sense. Perfect sense.
Right.
Yeah.
The next one is a single shoulder raise. So it's literally a single shoulder pop. Either shoulder can either pop up just slightly, And based on that, it actually means an objection or disagreement. So they don't believe what they're saying, or they don't believe what you're saying. And like, it's just this simple little pop. And you're like, all right, cool. Who's talking? What are we talking about? What's the context? How do I circle back to this and ask them in a non-threatening way? Do they have any feedback? Have they heard something else? What's their experience with that situation? So I can kind of probe a little deeper into really what's going on. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And, if these cues, right? I mean, we're always looking for objections in sales, right? And how to address them and how to handle them. And if that nonverbal communication exists and we know there's an objection, that's a big advantage, I think.
100%. And most people, I would say 99% of people literally miss this stuff. And the last one is actually reassurance. And I share this one with people because it's really important. And women can actually chew their hair. So it's literally, if anything crosses the lips, right? So most people will chew on a pen. I'm sure you've noticed this in a boardroom, in a conversation. People will chew on the pen. And at that point in time, they need reassurance to what's been spoken about. An example is you're talking about price. So it's going to cost you $100,000 a year. And they start going like this, right? The thing is they've instantly saying to you, I need reassurance about the value, the ROI, whatever it is, because I don't agree with it at that point in time. Another example of lip compression is you could say the price and they could lip compress. So it means they're not putting something in their mouth, but they're actually just holding back, and they've got an objection. They're not voicing. And what they may want to tell you is, hey, I got a quote from XYZ and it's $25,000 cheaper or whatever it is. So you need to be aware of that context to give you that importance. So those three alone can help transform any conversation you have today.
Yeah, those are great, Ben, because when I thought about this, and you hit it right in the head, there's like hundreds of body language cues out there. And it can be overwhelming. So I think if you stick with a basic few, I think you'd be much better off, unless you're an expert at the stuff, which none of us are.
No. And
well,
to be an expert, actually. You've got to put, I'm improving every single day. So all I'm doing is just getting better and trying to hone my craft, because I literally struggled so much with communication to begin with that I'm like, okay, how do I impart and fast track the success plan for other people? And that's why, for example, one of the things we do to help people like yourself, we can analyze your call recordings. We can analyze your video calls. And we can show you the body language you missed. So we can show you the linguistics of what happened through your entire conversation. We can show you the emotional arc. And there's something I actually call the happiness sandwich. And the happiness sandwich is quite interesting because people only remember the start of something and the end of something. So this whole podcast, they'll be like, how did it start? How did it end? And if people end in a happy state and a happy emotion, they're going to remember that. And that's the emotion that's going to fester and carry through to the next thing. Right? So the thing is what happens when your sales calls end in a negative emotion?
Is that a question?
That's a question.
Oh,
That's
okay.
a question.
I don't know if you're making a
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, that's always a tough one. And you've got to get with the team and figure out what the next steps are to follow up to turn that around. But, a lot of times you're in a call and it's fluid, right? And you may not know what to say at that point. But yeah, in your point, if you don't address that immediately, you're done.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we can literally provide you within 15 minutes or so of you finishing a call. You can have that full linguistic analysis of what happened, what their needs are, what their desires are, what the contextual importance are. Did you have influence? Did you have clout? Were you talking to analytically? So therefore you're forcing them. Here's something of real interest. If you speak too analytically and force them to think more, you slow down the decision-making process, because they say you've turned on the fire hose and you've overwhelmed me. And that's what a lot of salespeople do. They kind of go into that overwhelm of that feature and forget the person they're talking to. And if they just connect what they're talking to the person's pain and sell the vacation, they'll actually have a far more effective and faster closing cycle.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
That's all important data that allows you to go, hey, okay, great. Now I have to follow up with Sally and Frank and all these guys. Like, how do I effectively follow up with them?
Yeah. So a couple more questions, Ben. So when you're on a call with someone like we are right now on a Zoom call, is this giving you analytics live?
We can do, yes. You can actually have real-time analytics. You can have your dashboard open. We find for a lot of people, the real-time analytics can be distracting because it gives them something else to focus on. And so what we usually do is we get people started with the post-call analysis. So it's kind of like a debrief on what happens. But yes, you can tap it into complete live analytics. We have a lot of people who like do mergers and acquisitions who literally use this as their competitive understanding to find out, are they bluffing? It's like all this type of stuff going on.
Wow.
And it's connected to a dashboard, right? So most people, like, it's fascinating when you look at most people's setup. They don't have a 2-screen setup. So the thing is if I've got Zoom on one screen, like, where do you want this data to display, right? You'll be amazed at the number of people who don't record their calls, don't record the Zoom calls, right?
Yeah. I would say that's a majority, Ben, from what I can see. I don't record my calls.
Yeah. And the thing is when you look at that from a sales perspective is, well, how else are you going to get better? How else are you going to get a feedback loop for analysis? So we've had to work with a lot of clients to literally create this real-time analysis without the recording and then just give you the data you need. So you can do that. Because the last thing you want to be honest, is also you want the data distracting you from the authenticity you need to have in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to look like you don't want to look like a robot.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just fascinating stuff. So I think I know the types of people that would benefit from this, but who would this not be a fit for? Let's get that out of the way. What do you think?
Yeah, so
what do you thought?
Yeah, it's not a fit for people who are one call closers in where we're at right now with what we're doing. Because if you've got a one call close and if you're using high pressure and if you're all about like, I need to make 1,000 dials today and just that's how I'm connecting with people, it's not a fit for you. If you've got really no interest in actually doing relationship-based sales, it's not for you. Okay. Because you don't care if you piss people off. You're just getting that instant churn. If you've got a complex product, or a multi-step sale, perfect for you. And if you don't really care about your company culture, it's certainly not for you, because we can help you assess and improve your company culture, your company communication, your company effectiveness. But there's a lot of companies out there, to be honest, that really don't give a crap. They understand, hey, we've got 50 people we're hiring every Monday. We know we end up with 3 by Friday, and that's the game. We don't care. Like, that's the game.
You know, you would think that in this day and age, and we see it in all the major manufacturers that we represent, the churn, right? The turnover in employees. And you would think that they would get it one of these days and say, man, it costs me so much money to hire a new employee, to train him. And before he's up and running, we push him out the door and hire someone new. And I've never understood that.
Oh, there's one company, it's just quite interesting. It's like, literally, every 2 to 3 months, the account manager is new. Hey, I'm just going to introduce you to your new account manager. Like, you were the new account manager. I'm like, and you want me to have more trust in you when you can't even keep the account managers rolling? Like, there's all this stuff that's like that soft metrics that you can really start to see. And we're in the process of actually doing exactly what you just spoke about with a few merger and acquisition companies who want us to be able to assess the personality types of like the private companies they're tracking, right?
Yep.
And actually see when there is a good hire or a bad hire, or if the person they just brought in, how it's going to negatively impact the company. Or is it going to positively impact the company? So like the sentiment and the analysis that you can gain, like even just from Slack communication, is quite mind-blowing for a lot of companies, and they just fail to understand that.
Yeah, that's amazing to me that you can do it just from like emails and Slack and Teams or whatever the platform you use.
Yeah. And a lot of people send out the customer satisfaction surveys, which are all great, but they're all biased. But the thing is like, I would rather analyze the emails that you've had back and forth with your clients and show you what really people are really thinking and feeling about your product, about your company, about your sales rep. That's data you can action on. The surveys are always a little biased, and you can do a lot of great stuff with them. We can even, there's one company, we literally are analyzing their survey responses to show true intent and the true emotions behind what people are saying. Because most people can't even read that. They can't understand what's going on behind the words.
Yeah, you know how it is. Most people don't want to be confrontational, right? So they're going to probably not give their true answers in a survey. Unless
if they even did it.
unless it's a blind survey where their name is not going to be associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So Ben, how long have you had your platform out there? Because this is fascinating stuff to me. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, so we've been using this technology in-house for a while now, but we've only literally this year, so this is a 2022 launch Behavior Sales and providing it as a platform for clients because we were doing it internally for ourselves. We were optimizing it internally for ourselves. And then we were having some great success with it, right? And I was sharing with friends what we were doing. And they're like, how the hell are you doing this? Like, how, like, for example, our cold LinkedIn outreach has a 33% response rate into conversations. And so people are like, how the hell are you getting that metric? Like, we get less than 2%, or it doesn't work. I was
going to say 33% is pretty good.
Yeah. And I'm like, it's because, like, one of the things we do is we take the list in which, like, you can generate a list of 1,000 people in LinkedIn. Anyone can do it. It's free, right? We literally take that list, we analyze it based on their personality type. So we then segment that list into its 4 segments based on the 4 birds. And then based on that, we send out a specific message written towards that bird type. And by doing that single step, we increase our response rate, which allows us to get in, because then in our CRM, we literally have the bird icon showing through of, hey, so when this person emails you, when this person communicates you, be aware, like, you're talking to an eagle, you're talking to a dove, you're talking to a peacock. So now the sales rep knows exactly what to do. Yeah. So, and that's the difference, if that makes sense. And I think in today's society, it's critically important in your ability to connect.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it seems like you make it really simple. You have like the 4 birds, how to communicate with them. And because I think, yourself, if you make something too difficult and overwhelming, people are going to resort back to what they know.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the big problems, as you mentioned, like, sales is very transient. Let's be honest. Like, it's a very transient industry. So you have to make it easy. Like, you can't have people do a 5-day boot camp to get set up anymore, right? And that's why we had to take the hardness out of a lot of this stuff. Like, people are like, oh, Ben, I've done a DISC assessment, or I've done a Myers-Briggs. I'm like, great. What are you? Oh, I'm something IPTQ, whatever it was. So what's it mean? I got no idea. How do you use it in a conversation? I got no idea. So the thing is you're 100% right. It's like, how do I give you the easy button? And I call them the conversation cheat sheets. How do I give you the conversation cheat sheet to connect with Paul and his intrinsic motivations?
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something here, Ben, because like you said, you got to have the easy button, or people aren't going to do it. And this sounds it's exciting.
Yeah. It's keeping me awake at night, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you get a lot at stake, but this is this is a big endeavor for you, and it's I think you're going to do well. I think there's a big need for this in the marketplace. Like you said, we've all been to all those sales training classes where the role play, the customer says this, so you need to say this, and there's like 3,000 different options, and you end up just glossing it over.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, you say that. That's funny. A client goes, hey, can you create a role-playing tool for us? So literally, you speak to our AI and it just presents different objections to you, and you have to answer that objection. And we're analyzing your tonality. We're analyzing your personality. And what we're trying to determine is what's the belief you have in relation to that objection, because you'll be amazed how a lot of sales reps are putting their beliefs and their objections into the prospect. They don't think the price it's too expensive. So therefore, literally, you'll have one sales rep who has a higher skew on pricing objections, and their only way to sell is discounting or price collapsing, which it's fascinating when you start to think about that in those use cases. And our whole goal is to become your conversational coach. Like, any conversation you're having, we can coach you to be more effective.
Yeah,
and connect with people.
Yeah, conversational coach. I like that. It's a good term. Yeah. So I think you told me about how this started, because that's important, right? You know, because you said you were terrible at sales and communicating, but from what I can see, you're a pretty good communicator from just being on this podcast. So you've obviously made some strides.
Oh, I try. It's lots of missteps. Yeah.
Well, before we go, Ben, I think we covered a lot of subjects today, and how you got started, and the whole communication, both verbal and nonverbal communication with the new platform, Behavior Sales. But if someone wanted to get in touch with you, Ben, because I think you're going to find that, you know, once people start listening to these things, people are going to start reaching out to you. How do they get in touch with you?
The easiest way is just behaviorsales.com. You can spell it the English or the American way. It really doesn't matter. You'll end up in the same place. And Paul, for everyone who's listening, if they mention the podcast, we'll get them access to the People Ignorant book at no cost. It'll be the digital copy of the book, which saves them $25.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Well, Ben, hey, it was great having you on today. I really appreciate it. Any final words for the folks out there outside of the book?
For everyone who just wants to improve their conversations, the fastest thing you can do is just become aware of who you are. Because if you know who you are and what your style is, you can start to see the world in its true light, and it'll help you connect with people faster. So that's my only biggest tip. And the easiest thing to do is take a personality assessment and kind of dive into it. If you want one, we can give them access to people as well, and help them apply this into their relationships, their conversations, their business, their team, their culture. It's conversation is the core of all of this.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, we'll end on that note. Ben, again, thanks for being on the show, and that's a wrap of Business Brains and the Bottom Line.